Meadowlark, Chapter 1, The Day Everything Changed in Fox's Hollow. The Meadowlark life is generally quiet, and to be frank, that's the way I prefer it. Nothing too interesting or exciting happens here out in the countryside. It's peaceful, serene, and your neighbors are magnanimous and helpful. If you need a cup of sugar, they'll be happy to oblige. At least, that's what Hilda next door does. She's become my surrogate grandmother. Oftentimes I will come to her house when her grandchildren are having a birthday or reunion. One might say I live a pretty enchanted life, but all was not going to remain silent in Fox's Hollow for long, especially after I encountered what I deemed an ordinary book on an otherwise humdrum day. Fox's Hollow was filled with the sounds of birds twittering. The sun was shining brilliantly, and the sky was the bluest I had ever seen from my bedroom window. This was a magnificent day to be alive, and I couldn't wait to go to school. Mom made a tremendous breakfast for me, and lunch was already bagged and ready to go. Both Mom and Dad had to head to work, and I had to make certain that our black cat, Sawyer, was fed, brushed, petted, and content, which he was consistently. He was mainly my cat and followed me around the house like a dog. Today he was on a window sill sunning himself, napping the day away. I kissed Mom and Dad goodbye for another enjoyable day of enlightenment. I'd get to see my best friends, and that alone was enough to motivate me into getting excited about academia. Sometimes my friends would come and visit me when our homework was through. Typically I'd hold a sleepover in our cottage estate. It was roomy and comfortable enough. We even had a rec room, which had a ping-pong table, billiard table, and classic arcade games. In the adjacent room was a massive library. Tonight wasn't one of those nights. My BFF, Madison, had to prepare for her cousin's bridal shower. She was going to be a bridesmaid in her cousin's wedding. As for my other friends, Fiona and Evie, they were preparing for Fiona's grandmother's 100th birthday. It was going to be quite the bash. Living out in the country so far from them was a disadvantage. Even with our income, the price of gas just wasn't worth the sojourn there. I sent a card to Grandma Teresa and some jelly beans. This should have given me some comfort, but I couldn't help feeling slightly guilty. Teresa, Evie, and Fiona were very understanding, though. They knew the state of the economy made it hard on everyone. So, with all my homework done, I did what I typically would. I wandered into the library to delve into some of the classics. I had not yet read Anton Chekhov's Omnibus, but I was always intrigued by Russian stories, myths, and tales. Reaching up into the bookcases using my favorite ladder, which made transport all the easier and slightly more dangerous due to the fact that I like to glide along the bookshelves at breakneck speeds, a book cascaded onto the ground with a resounding thud. Upon opening, the book glowed. I knew this was impossible, especially from a scientific viewpoint. Letters were becoming illuminated and glimmering, much like fireflies in August. I had been cynical about magic, and actually experiencing it was something extraordinary and petrifying at the same time. When I thought about magic, it conveyed the images of Sabrina the Teenage Witch, Nanny McPhee, and Mary Poppins and Harry Potter. I never once thought it would feel this way and be this frightening. I wasn't sure why, but I was weeping uncontrollably, as if a destiny was being forced upon me, one I wouldn't like undertaking one bit. I saw images of a man in a blue robe with stars and moons, sporting a stylish pointy blue hat. Unlike many wizards I'd read about, this one was young, hip, and rather handsome. He wore horn-rimmed glasses, making him look like a modern-day hipster. Hold this codex close. Guard it with every fiber of your being, Melody. Don't let it slip into the wrong hands, or it'll mean doom not only to magicians like ourselves, but to the entire world, the mage said. His name was Abraham, just like the one who had written the original Codex millennia ago. I wasn't sure what possessed me to nod my head in agreement, but I knew the words he had spoken carried immense responsibility, and it had fallen to me to uphold the secrets within this golden book, as well as the intense power it contained. I swear, sir, I said before the book landed itself in my hands. For such a tome, it weighed nothing, and I carried it about as if I had meant to for eons. Chapter 2. Why do we have a codex in our library? Once Mom and Dad arrived home, they had immense amounts of explaining to do. They tried to dismiss the fact that I had an illuminating codex underneath my arm, and it was still glowing. The lights in the room were dim compared to it. Why do we have a codex in our library? I began inquisitively. Celeste, you tell her, my father whispered to my mother. He was within earshot, so I heard every syllable falling from her lips. Arthur, I don't even know where to begin, my mom retorted a bit sharply. It seemed that this book, or more accurately, Codex, was of untold value since they couldn't even discuss it in front of me. They realized that they had no dodging this. That they had no dodging the subject. So my dad began first. You might find this difficult to swallow, Melody, but we're wizards, he began. My mouth could have hit the ground. I was a scientist. I didn't believe in magic. Magic was something unquantifiable and therefore non-existent. I'm not in some alternate reality, am I? I began, finding this all very difficult to comprehend. I feared either Mom or Dad would go into a lengthy soliloquy about our ancient past. As usual, sad to say, my hunch was correct. For eons we've been keepers of the light. Since the Codex contains untold volumes of information capable of changing and transforming lives, it's also known as the light. In order to shield mankind from destruction, only those of our blood can handle the Codex itself. There are those, the Obscuros, who want the book for themselves for evil purposes, my dad said. Even Merlin had protected the tome at some point in his life. My own dad was the direct descendant of the King Arthur. All of this was strictly unbelievable and fantastical. I had the hardest time trying to process it through my cynical, empirical brain. No sooner was this all explained to me, as well as who my enemies were, John Obscuro, his wife Doris, and son Timothy, that a shiver ran through my spine. My whole body went cold. John will try many ploys to shake your confidence and uproot your faith, dear. It is only necromancy. Never forget, light always overpowers the dark, my mom said, as she comforted me in my hour of need. I had never felt so shaken in my entire life, yet I knew this was only a foreshadowing of what John had in store for me. Chapter 3. The Macabre Shadow Masks. Throughout the week I felt myself become more infused with the power that the book had given me. It was as if I had a sixth sense of what to do, when to do it, and how to defeat whatever evil came my way. Tragically, I had no clue how to fight the nightmare demons or how to match wits with them. Every night I would have unspeakable nightmares about the humongous masks. These shadow masks, as I defined them, were abominable, detestable creations from dark thoughts of John Obscuro himself. As my mom and dad had warned me earlier, this was a test of mettle, wit, whim, intellect, and all other faculties I possessed. I was a mere teenager, though, and not having watched too many horror films, I can say, there were many times I felt I would wet myself from fear staring down these fearful beings. They were much bigger than a normal human being, with razor-sharp teeth to devour a human being's whole. They didn't eat humans, however. They fed off fear as well as the soul, if they could catch you. I never allowed these shadow masks with their crimson eyes to come too close, even to allow my soul to be sucked clear from my body. The fear I had, though, was allowing them to grow in size and number. Breathing deeply through my nose and mouth, I knew I had to gather my senses and pull myself together. The most colossal of the macabre masks was looking at me, eye to eye. It grumbled viscerally, baring its teeth. It was about to inhale when I placed my forehead against it and glowered in return. You think you're so big and tough, Mask. You're not. You're just a bully, a coward who enjoys scaring others for amusement. You're the one who should be ashamed. If you think you're feasting on my soul today, sir, you have another thing coming. I will not be intimidated. You hear me, Mask? So bug off, I shouted at the top of my lungs. The mask nearly smirked and dissipated, while the other smaller masks followed suit. These mass dreams continued for some time until a mysterious shadow, one that resembled smoke, followed me and stalked me in my nightmares. Having quite enough of John's mucking about with me, I thought if I called about the aid of the Codex, he would get the message and understand I wasn't to be bothered. Light of Ancients, give me aid, help me in my hour of need, I incanted in Sumerian. How I even knew the Sumerian language baffled, dazzled, and confused me altogether. It was no importance of the time, because the incantation worked. The Codex appeared, and the pages flipped instantaneously to a spell that would shield me from John's necromancy. Take that, you pervy old necromancer, I said, after the spell had been cast. He shook his head from left to right. You may have built a fortress around you, girl, and I can no longer infiltrate your psyche, but I will find other methods of hunting you down and taking that book from you, he threatened. You'll have to pry it from my cold, dead hands, Obscuro, I retorted, deadly serious about how dedicated I was to keeping our Earth safe from lunatics like himself. That can be arranged, girl. Mark my words, this isn't our last battle, John said before his power ultimately gave out, and he whisked away as if he had never been in my dreams to begin with. Chapter 4. The Unlikely Pacifist. School seemed to be the only normal mode of existence from day to day. Sure, I got the usual, "My, Melody, you look dazzling. What's your secret?" from the occasional boy eager to date me, or, Melody, you seem to glow. Been working out? For my girlfriends, I didn't want to breathe a word of the book to them. It was an after effect of the enlightenment I had been infused with, and naturally my skin took on a golden sheen. The book and its whereabouts, though, were in my heart like a steel trap. I was the only one who knew where it was kept. One quiet evening, as I was breathing deeply of the crisp fall air and imbibing some hot green tea, a man appeared in the distance. He was clothed in black and surrounded by an ominous aura. Before even advancing closer to me, I knew this was John. My wife has been doing a lot of internet research. Thank the goddess of technology for Google Maps, he cackled. If he wasn't so evil, I would have found him downright comical. Before long, his wife winked into existence alongside him. Fantastic! Now there are two of you and one of me. Don't you think that unfair? I questioned, trying not to allow my underlying fear to rule me. Not by our standards, Doris said sarcastically with a sinister grin. I braced myself for battle until Timothy appeared. He wasn't dressed like his mother and father in ridiculous black robes, but was your typical Goth in garb. Mom, Dad, stop! You know this is wrong. We don't need to keep going about this again and again. We've been fighting long enough with the Meadowlarks. This won't stop until we let bygones be bygones, Tim said. For some strange reason, I found myself lost in his violet eyes, his strong baritone voice, and found his black-purple hair attractive. He was brave and stood up for his beliefs. He knew war wasn't the right pathway to trod, and even I found that admirable. I would have taken the same stance myself, but I had been poised for battle as soon as I had seen the warlocks approaching me. Timothy reappeared in front of his parents and situated himself between them and me. He put out his arms and created a hedge of energy that wouldn't allow them to pass. Somehow, though, I was able to enter into it. How are you doing that? I asked curiously. It's in my blood. I chose a different pathway than typical for Obscuro kin. Besides, I wanted to keep you safe. I was sick of seeing Dad torture you in my dreams and unable to do anything about it, Tom said. Wait, he subjected you to my nightmares? How is that even possible? I said, feeling slightly violated at the time. His psychic prowess is fierce. Age supersedes youth in this matter, Timothy said in a whisper aside to me. He began his diatribe on the virtues of peace and why engaging in another wizard-warlock war was simply illogical. If not for us, then for everyone who will be affected by our choices, he ended. For a teen, he was quite sage. I could tell he had done quite a bit of reading and could talk anyone into reasonable solutions. The phrase, the power of words, never meant more than it did in this very second. Doris and John weighed the options versus the dictates of their hearts. Inwardly, they knew there was no rebuttal or refutal. All right, boy, you've won. You do what you want with your life. We want no part of your kind. You've gone too soft, John said, disappointed and disheartened. With a blast of black smoke from his hand, he disappeared, taking Doris with him. I knew they were going to disown me after my speech, Tim said tragically. Something urged me to embrace him and give him comfort. He could find a happier life here in Fox's Hollow. It would take time for him to figure out where he belonged, but he and I were very much alike in that regard. Epilogue. Timothy lived in the guest house, which was big enough for 4 people. He never complained, and always helped where he was needed. I never thought an Obscuro would be so handy in the kitchen, but being of Italian blood, the food that he created for us on pasta nights was simply divine. I knew whatever awaited me was bound to be extraordinary. If it hadn't been before, it was only going to become more so. The Codex would be cared for by myself, and it had felt, or sensed, how a book can do these things is beyond me, that Timothy was trustworthy to tote it around before putting it back into its hallowed shelves. He had even taken upon the glow that I had about me, and around him I felt a happiness and serenity that I couldn't put into words. It didn't matter what the future held for us, or my family, even my friends. All I knew was that in this sacred moment everything was safe and secure. The human race was saved, thanks to Timothy's courage and honor. There would be many years of joy to come, but we took our time, savoring each second we had been given, one by one. From the Journal of Melody Marie Meadowlark.